So good morning, everyone, and thank you all for joining us on this Football Friday. Many of you may remember that just over a year ago, we had the privilege of welcoming Tom Mendoza back to the Mendoza College of Business in the Jordan Auditorium, where he shared an inspiring reflection on his incredible career and exceptional leadership. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Tom once again, who will introduce our special guest, Carl Eschenbach, for the inaugural conversation to kick off an exciting new series of conversations between Tom and extraordinary industry leaders called Tom Mendoza Presents. Tom has been a great friend to Notre Dame, and I'm so honored that he has agreed to lead this new series, featuring conversations between Tom and many of the great business leaders of our time. It's a great honor for us to host these conversations at Notre Dame, thanks to Tom's generous leadership and love for Our Lady's University. Tom is a Notre Dame graduate and a former Vice Chairman of NetApp, where he served for over 25 years, leading NetApp's worldwide sales team. In 2000, Tom was named president of the company, and during his tenure, NetApp achieved the #1 ranking according to Fortune magazine's 100 best companies to work for. Thanks to Tom's leadership, NetApp is now a Fortune 500 company with over $1 billion in revenue. Tom has not only demonstrated extraordinary leadership in service to his colleagues, but to many philanthropic causes as well, including the Pat Tillman Foundation, St. Baldrick's Foundation, the Rush Foundation for Children's Literacy, and the Navy SEAL Foundation. As we know so well here at the College of Business named for Tom and his family, he has also been a great friend to Notre Dame. Tom, we're so grateful to have you and Carl with us today. Please join me in welcoming Tom Mendoza.
Thank you, Martin. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to host this series, and I'm thrilled to have Carl, my great friend Carl, as our first guest. Let me just give Carl a proper introduction. So Carl joined VMware in 2002. They had 200 people in the company, 30 million in revenue. Carl rose up to be president in 2016, his last year there. They were 7 billion in revenue and 20,000 employees with a market cap of over 7 billion. So when someone does that, you figure that act was great, it's over. What do you do next? Well, what Carl did next is he became one of the premier venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, joining the iconic firm Sequoia. During his time, he serves on some fantastic boards like Palo Alto and Workday, but Carl's made some investments that are unbelievable by any evaluation. Last 18 months ago, what we're watching today, Zoom, went public at $18 billion valuation. Today it's worth over 150 billion. Congratulations, Carl. And 1 month ago today, Snowflake, in an incredible IPO, went public with it, and today is worth $66 billion. So Carl has had an incredible run of success, and I'd like to explore his story with him today. Carl, welcome to Notre Dame, virtual Notre Dame.
Thank you so much, Tom and Martin, for having me today. And thank you for that introduction, Tom. I'm nervous to say anything else because it can only go downhill from there.
It's going downhill from here.
Yeah, so I've been very, very blessed and lucky. And, being here at Sequoia on such an amazing platform with such great partners, it's, stood the test of time for 50 years. It's just been an amazing journey the last 4.5 years. But yeah, thank you for having me. This is a great honor, and it's a great honor to share this stage with you, Tom, who I witnessed, in a leadership role for over 25 years. And I think Notre Dame is quite fortunate to have you play such an active role in a series like this and be such a great sponsor of the business school and what Martin and everyone is doing there. So thank you very much. It's going to be a great discussion, I hope.
Let's have some fun. So, Carl, my first question to you. If I went back to East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, where you grew up, town of 10,000 people, and I met people who knew you well then, but they didn't follow your career, and I told them exactly what I said in the introduction, how surprised would they be?
Wow. You surprised me right off the bat. That wasn't part of it. That's a great question. Well, here's what I think, or I should say, I'd hope they'd say. I hope they'd say, we're not surprised that Carl has found success in life. Starting with that first. And that has led to his success in business over the last almost 35 years. And I believe they would say that. Maybe they wouldn't understand what I do today or what I've accomplished, but I think they would say he was a young man who grew up with a tremendous family, who worked hard in everything he did. He wasn't the biggest, strongest, fastest kid in any of the sports he played, but somehow he always kind of rose to the top because of his work ethic, his can-do attitude, and his relentless desire to find success in everything that he participated in or was part of. So I hope they would say, I'm not surprised, but I think probably they'd be a bit surprised as to where it's led me in life, and maybe it's more than they would have expected.
Love that. You know, one of Carl's passions is wrestling. And in fact, I actually was a wrestler also, as Carl knows, but Carl was inducted into the National Collegiate Wrestling Hall of Fame last year. And he was under the category of Great American. And what that meant was he had great success on the mat, but he's given a tremendous amount back to that sport. How did wrestling contribute to who you are today? What role did it play?
Yeah, Tom, you know, wrestling, especially the older I've gotten and I reflect back on my career, it really did shape me both as an individual and as a business professional. And there's probably three reasons why. So first, if you just think about the word wrestle means to struggle. And I always felt like every day I woke up, if I felt like I was struggling, that would mean I'd have to find a way to get better, to overcome the struggle that I was battling, whether it was in sports or business. And in wrestling, it is a struggle. It is a tough sport. It's demanding, and it requires a tremendous amount of discipline. So first, I'd say it taught me, right, first how to lose, because you're not going to go undefeated forever. Only one person did that in his career, and that was Dan Gable. But more important, I really, I just learned how to fight through every single thing I did every single day. The second would be, as I said earlier, it's a disciplined sport. It requires a tremendous amount of discipline. It requires a tremendous amount of focus. Sometimes there would be days where you wouldn't, as you know, Tom, being a wrestler, you would go without eating dinner with your family because you'd have to make weight. And it just, that discipline and perseverance that is required in wrestling, really taught me a lot. And then the last thing is, and Tom, I know you like sports, everyone says there is no I in team. And I actually would say I disagree with that. And let me tell you why. And this is what I attribute to wrestling. In wrestling, you typically have 10 or 12 people on a team. But when you go on the mat, you are an individual.
That's
and
right.
The only way you can impact that team overall is through your performance. And when you think about the business world, yes, it is a team that ultimately leads you to success, but that team cannot be successful if you don't wake up, look in the mirror every single day and say, what am I going to do to impact the team, impact my peers, impact the people that I'm responsible for? So if I were to look back, it taught me how to be an individual, but it also taught me how to be part of a team and not to lose sight that I would spell teamy.
I always say,
so it taught me that. It taught me a lot about individual nature and the impact it could have on a team.
Yeah, I always felt, Carl, and I never really had this conversation with anybody. If I lost and the team won, I did not feel good. It wasn't, you had to win. And of course you wanted the team to win, but you're there. The only thing you can do to help that team is win. So and you have to be disciplined. You can't eat and all the things So I really thought that was a cool thing you did in your background, and that you supported the sport that doesn't get a lot of support. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
So let's take a look. Now we zip to where you are today. And you got a lot of young people watching, but our primary audience is Notre Dame students and alumni, but although there's a lot of people watching. But looking back at your life, you made some decisions, you made some investments in yourself that paid off very, very well eventually. What do you think you did right? If you had to say 2 or 3 things that really had a major impact on how your success ended up? What would those be?
You know, Tom, there was what I would say a couple crucible moments in my life. You know, the important decisions that shape you as a human and ultimately as a business professional. The first one was I initially started off, Tom, going to a four-year university for wrestling, a scholarship in a small school called Wilkes College in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, a Division I wrestling school. And I was really excited to go there and really focus on wrestling. I was there a semester, and I had a brother-in-law who was going to a technical school called DeVry University. And I did not quite honestly know much about technology at all. I loved math, but I was not deep in technology. And I saw what he had done in a short period of time. And the fact that he went there and got out and got into this field called technology. And I made a decision, and it's a crucible decision, because as I look back, I am both happy with this decision, but I'm also disappointed. And what I mean by that, I decided to go to DeVry University. I am an individual who, everyone listening on this call, I'm grateful that you even have me on this call, because I don't have a college degree. I went to a technical school. So on one hand, I'm thankful that I did that, because it got me into the technology industry in 1987. But I also do have some regrets, Tom, and disappointment that I didn't enjoy the college experience that everyone on this call probably has had over their 4 years of undergrad, and now many people sitting here in the School of Business and going, furthering their education. So I think that was a crucible moment in my life, and it was a very tough decision. And while it worked out, I would be disingenuous if I didn't say, man, I wish I would have stuck through and got my 4-year degree. But what it also taught me, the more I got into my career, there is no better educator than time and experience. And once you get in the workforce, it is critical that you put everything you have into whatever job you have at any given time. And you work hard, you stay focused, and you let your results ultimately determine your success. And I'd say there's two other things that I've learned now in my mid-50s, reflecting back, that I would share with younger people on the call. What I realized, Tom, and I think you could appreciate this because this is the type of leader you are, when people are typically younger in their careers, they have a tendency to be attracted to or want to follow people with really high IQ because they're impressed with their intellectual horsepower in their knowledge. As you get more experience and you grow your career and you find more success, I will tell you, you'll start to have a tendency to want to follow people with extremely high EQ.
100%.
And you never really think about that till you're later in your career. So I always give that coaching and guidance to people now. Find people who are really smart, but has a really nice balance on the EQ side, because they're the people that you're going to want to be with that will stand the test of time. And then the last thing I'd say, and this is something I know, Tom, you've done remarkably well, and I believe I've done in my career, and I can say this now, that we probably both did it well, but we didn't know we were doing it well. So I'm saying it to tell people to focus on it. There is one of the things that will be the most powerful influencer of your success in business going forward is your network.
Yeah.
Or you build a deep, meaningful network through real relationships, not surface relationships, will ultimately help you be successful in business, because you can call on people. They'll be there for you. They'll act as your mentor. You'll act as their mentor. So build the network of people around you, and don't make it surfacey. Make it real, meaningful relationships. And I think that will have a sustaining multiplier on your career going forward.
I think that's awesome advice. And as an aside, I'm always impressed by the number of Notre Dame students that reach out while they're there to people like me and other people, very respectfully. If they ask for some time, I always respond, but I that's when you want to start. I mean, you're in an area where you're with a lot of unbelievable people. Make sure you take advantage of it. The professors, the people around you want to help. One of the things about Notre Dame I'll comment on, Carl, is I never had the feeling when I was there that I was competing with the other people. I felt like everybody wanted the best out of each other. And that's something that carried with me in my career. It wasn't about beating each other. It was about lifting everybody together to a win.
Yeah.
So you brought up the word mentor. Who was, if you had to say one person, biggest influence on your life as a mentor?
Yeah, Tom, I do get asked this question quite a bit, and it's interesting. Most people would probably stop and think about who was their business mentor, who they really respect and look up to. And I must say, my mentor and how I think about it, it's a very easy answer. It was my father. My father was a man who dedicated his life to his family. He barely got out of high school. He went into service. He moved my family to Pennsylvania, to the Poconos. Somehow he got into business, into a soft ice cream, Dairy Queen business. But then he quickly realized, oh my gosh, you can't sell, soft ice cream in the winter. What am I going to do? And somehow he got in the Christmas tree business. So I grew up in the summers serving ice cream, and in the winter in the fields cutting Christmas trees and selling them to live a very middle class life with my father. And he just taught me the importance of family. He taught me the importance of treating others with respect. He taught me this life lesson of will beat skill every single day. There's some highly skilled people out there and highly skilled athletes, but will beat them. And the thing he probably taught me most, Tom, and you've heard me say this, is the importance of your heart. And what I mean by that is, when people are in difficult situations or they have to make tough decisions, typically what we do, we call our friends, we call our family, we seek guidance, we seek feedback. And all of that is information gathering that goes into your mind, but your mind is a very complex organism. It has multiple parts to it. And typically what happens, the more information you get, the more you get confused.
That's right.
And I don't mean to sound morbid when I describe this, Tom, but people unfortunately can be brain dead, and we can keep them alive a really, really long time. And I say that because I'm shifting now to talk about your heart. And your heart is not the biggest muscle or biggest organ in your body, but Tom, when your heart dies, you die. And what my father taught me, that in life, when it comes down to any really tough decision, follow your heart, because it very rarely lets you down. And that is something that has stuck with me over and over again. And I can tell you, and Tom, you know this because I'm sure it's happened to you, where you know in your heart what to do in a certain situation, and your mind is telling you, go do this, or other people are going to.
That's right.
You go and do it, and it fails, and you look back and said, I knew it. My heart was telling me to do this. So
you're right.
One of the greatest lessons my father, who's in heaven looking down on me today, that I know, and I'll be with him soon at some point, that he taught me, that has stuck with me, since he passed now 14 years ago. And I am so lucky that he taught me that. And the other funny thing, Tom, as my son, who's now 17, would lay in bed every night, and I'd walk down the hall, go in and say goodnight to him. We had this ritual, and it felt like I was connecting my father in heaven to me, to my son, through 3 generations. I'd look at my son laying in bed, and I'd just punch him in the heart, and I'd go 3 times. It's all about heart. Now that he's 17, I tell people there's nights that I want to put my fist right through his heart, but I don't. But it's a cool thing to have. So it's my father, Tom.
That's great.
I'm very blessed that he was with me as long as he was. He passed away way too early, but he's with me today. I know that.
I love that. I had the opportunity to speak at Notre Dame last year, and I gave a talk. And I talked about the influence my dad had on me. And as you talked, it comes all back again. Thank God that we had parents that cared enough to give you that, right? And it has a big influence on how we turn out. So let's switch gears to let's
And
switch
Tom, I
gears.
heard, by the way, you've done some amazing speeches at the university, and one time you had your dad up there with you, and I heard that was quite impactful. Obviously,
Yeah.
to you, but the audience as well.
Yeah, that was at the endowment ceremony, and he had claustrophobia late in life, Carl, and he did not want to get up on. He almost didn't want to come to Notre Dame, but he did. And if we were at Notre Dame today, we'd be at the Jordan Auditorium, beautiful facility. And he was over around the other side of the wall where no one could see him. And my final thoughts were, if three things happen in your life, you should consider yourself fortunate. Number one, if you grow up in America, we have the opportunity to live in America. Because I'm well aware if I grew up in Afghanistan, no matter what I did, it wouldn't have mattered. Number two is if you have parents who tell you can. That's what I was reflecting on. We didn't have any money or anything like that, but I always believed we could do anything. And then the last one was if you have someone in your life whose happiness needs more to you than your own, and they feel the same way, so you have a strength and a belief every day that someone's on your side. And then I said, and for today only, I have to do this. We only have one living relative. I want to bring my dad up here. And he tried not to come, but they actually pushed him up. And front row was Condoleezza Rice and Jack Welch and Larry Bossidy. I learned later from Warren Buffett that he was in the back row because we were playing Nebraska the next day. And Warren said to me, that was a moment no one in that room will ever forget. We turned around, me and my dad, and everyone was crying, standing up and crying. And,
What a great story, Tom.
It was unbelievable.
I'm glad you had the privilege to do that and share it with your university, the great Notre Dame.
It was one of those moments. Yeah. The next day, Carl, my dad also enlisted in the World War II. He enlisted 2 months after Pearl Harbor at 16 years old, fought in the Pacific, and he walked the flag out. And you haven't been to Notre Dame yet. You come with me next year. But it's a very formal thing where they hand it off to the Irish Guard, and then they march over, and as the flag's going up, it's halfway up the flagpole. He snapped into a salute, and two Mirage fighters went right over us. It was like, whoa! So when people say, "What's your proudest moment?" That's it.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, let's switch to business. You know, you've led an incredible company, and you're on the board of a number of incredible companies. Let's talk about, and they're scaling at rates no one's ever seen successfully. So what do you think is the key attributes that allows companies that do that? What does best look like? What is the best of those companies that allows them to scale successfully look like?
Yeah, Tom. I think it starts and stops, and then I'll fill in around that with culture. And I think building the right type of culture at a company fundamentally is what keeps everything else afloat. What are your values? What do you want to be known as? Because if you have the right culture and the right value system, you can attract the best people. But once you attract them, the important thing is retaining them. Yep. And they stay because of the culture. And as you know, Tom, every company runs into issues or challenges. Every company's back is against the wall at some point.
That's right.
The way you overcome that, first and foremost, will be completely dependent on the culture and whether or not you have the ability to rally the troops to overcome whatever obstacle or hurdle is in front of you. So first and foremost, great companies scale, and they scale based on culture, and they build cultures that can be tweaked, but they stand the test of time. So that's number one. The other thing that I recognize in scaling companies is that I often say the fastest way to scale is to simplify.
That's great.
Simplicity scales, complexity doesn't. And what happens is companies grow and get bigger. You have more and more layers of management. You have more and more compliance. You have more and more controls. You have more people touching the customers. And it's not uncommon as you're scaling a company through a rapid growth phase that people start to say, man, we're hard to do business with. Or your customers will say, man, it's hard to get things done with you. And when you dive into why, it's because you as a company, as you are scaling, added the complexity, or I like to say put sand in the gears to slow things down.
That's right.
So I often talk about how do you keep things simple? How do you keep that flywheel going in business? Because the more complexity you add into the system, the more slowly you are to your customers and to your employees. And I think it's really important you focus on simplicity. In fact, you can take it to a real life example for us as humans. Anytime you run into an issue, Tom, or Martin, or Natalie, who will be speaking here in a bit, when you run into an issue, personally or professionally, everyone says, you know what, Tom, you got to go back to what? Basics.
The basics. Get back to the basics.
Because it's simple.
That's right.
Scaling fast requires a simple operating model.
Love that. What about innovation? What about innovation?
Yeah.
Because all the company, how do you think about innovation?
Yeah, so there's three forms of innovation I think companies need to focus on. First of all, if you're not innovating, Tom, you know you're dying, right?
Yeah.
You have to innovate. And if the world is moving outside your company faster than you are, death is near.
That's right.
You fight that off is through innovation. And there's three types of innovation. The first is organic innovation. This is where your engineering and R&D organization continue to bring out new products, goods, and services. They're innovating internally. You're investing in engineering, in R&D to bring out whatever it may be. So that organic innovation can never leave a company. The second type of innovation is what I describe as inorganic innovation. It's when you see a market opportunity that you know you can capture because maybe you have the distribution engine on the go-to-market side or the sales side, but you can't get to it fast enough. So you have to inorganically innovate through acquisition or mergers.
Yes.
And people don't think of that as innovation. They just think about innovation and what are we going to do to continue to innovate? So inorganic innovation is critically important. And the third one, and Tom, as you know, you and I grew up on the sales and marketing side for, multiple decades. Right. I think people miss the importance and the power behind go-to-market innovation. In fact, I believe go-to-market innovation and thinking about how you capture new customers and maintain them can actually trump the first two, because you're not always going to have a new product come into market. You're not going to have something every year for the sales teams to sell. So you have to figure out how you can be really innovative to capture new market share, to maintain customers, and people don't think of that innovation. In fact, most people, Tom, you remember this, people are saying, I don't have anything new to sell. What's engineering doing? What's R&D doing? And I always challenge people and say, look in the mirror. What are you doing to innovate on how we're taking the product to market and how we can get it sold faster? That's our responsibility. So
that's right.
Forms of innovation: organic, inorganic, and go to market.
The reason I love that answer, Carl, is because most people only go to R&D when they think innovation. And great companies are innovating in every way all the time. Think of Apple and things that they do. I mean, it's just astounding, right? You think about what they are now. What about obviously leadership is the key to great companies. And it's not just the leader, it's leadership throughout. What would you highlight as the best attributes of leadership, of a leader that you respect, appreciate, and see super effective?
Yeah, boy, Tom. So first of all, you're a great leader. And when I talk about what leadership qualities, traits, and characteristics look like, I think you display a lot of them. I'll say that right up front.
Thank you.
And this is a conversation, Tom, we could have for maybe 8 hours one day at Notre Dame because there's so much to it. But let me try to shrink it down to a handful of things that I think are really important for people to think about if they want to ultimately become a great leader. Let me start and stop with, you need to be humble and you need to be grounded.
Agreed.
I always say to people, I remember where I came from, I know where I'm at, and I know where I'm going. And I want to be that same person with 2 feet firmly planted on the ground the entire time and be humble. I'm thankful. I'm so damn lucky, a kid from Pennsylvania, stumbling into things I've stumbled into. So just be humble, keep it real, remain grounded. I think it's also important to be authentic. and not take yourself too serious. Authenticity is really, really important to me. And, make fun of yourself, have fun along the way. I talk about the E plus E is highly contagious. And the two E's are energy and enthusiasm. You know, when you work for someone that has energy, has enthusiasm, it kind of permeates through the organization. I saw you, Tom, on stage a couple of times at NetApp kickoffs. The place is fun. And that's because the leader has energy. They have enthusiasm. I can remember walking down the hall, like in a big corporate complex, and you're walking down the hall because you have some damn title. People turn their heads and they walk by you, and all of a sudden you say, "Good morning," and they're like, like, come on,
Exactly.
like you're in the kitchen getting coffee. You say to someone, "Can I get your coffee?" Like, just have energy and enthusiasm. It's highly contagious. And then there's two more things I'd highlight. First, I'll talk about different types of leadership. There are great leaders out there who are motivational leaders. But Tom, when you think about motivational leaders and what it means, motivation is a push technique. You're pushing your people. You're driving them to become better, which is a great thing. And there's some great motivational leaders out there. But then there's leaders that take it to the next level. And they're what I describe as inspirational leaders. And inspirational leaders don't use push techniques. It's a pull technique where you inspire people to be inspired. And people say, I don't want to let Tom Mendoza down. I don't want him to fail. That is a pull technique.
Right.
I can tell you that is highly, highly powerful. And then the third leader is the one who can do both. Knows when they have to push their team, to motivate, to drive them through different things, like how you compensate them, how you reward them. And yet they're inspirational and they have that pull technique to suck people in.
I think the secret to that, Carl, is you have to put so much into helping people be successful. You have to give so much that when you ask back, they know you've given that and they don't want to let you down.
Great way
What's
to put it.
wrong is to just ask, but you haven't done your part.
Yes.
So I always say to leaders, what have you done? Let's switch gears because we're gonna go to questions. Go.
My last thing, because it's for me probably one of the most important traits, and I've really started to think about this more just in the last 10 to 15 years. I think a great trait is to learn how to be a servant leader.
Yeah.
And a lot of people talk about servant leadership, Tom, but when you ask them what it means, they have no idea. It's a buzzword. But if you break it down and you think about servant leadership, break down the word servant. Servant means you're serving. And I fundamentally believe if you study servant leadership and you get deeply into it, you will recognize that the greatest way to lead is to follow. And if you can follow your people and understand them, you think about, someone in the field with all their sheep and they're trying to get all the sheep herded in. They're not in front, they're in back. They're following. So study servant leadership, especially at a great university like Notre Dame in the business school. If you can do anything around teaching people what it means and breaking it down, it can be highly powerful. And I'd love to have that conversation one day.
Well, one of the things that Martin has driven is Notre Dame has a mantra, a new one, grow the good in business. So business should be doing good for the communities to help the underserved. There's got to be a purpose. So what's your take on that? And do you have examples where you've seen people do that well?
Yeah, so I do. I think some of the greatest businesses in the world have a mission. I think having a mission as part of your culture is highly powerful. People want to have something they're trying to aspire to be or aspire to do, to have impact on the greater good of the world and communities. That's why things like, ESG have become so much more important. No one even talked about it 10 years ago. Now you're talking about what are you doing around the environmentals? How are you thinking about water?
Yep.
What are you doing with your waste? The social impact, right? How you treat your people, your customers, you think about diversity. And, the governance piece of that, Tom, is, how you are running the company not do the financial metrics, right? So I think anything associated with mission-driven companies, I think there's a lot of studies out there that show their success far outweighs ones that aren't mission-driven. So, there's lots of companies, and you were at one of them. You saw it firsthand and were part of the leadership. I think VMware, if I look back at VMware, one of the greatest things we did is we always talked about, we want to strive both personally and professionally to give more than we get. Man, what a mission that is. And it's amazing what you get in return when you strive to give more than you get. You get a hell of a lot in return, but you're not focused on it. It just happens.
Very, very early on at NetApp, we had people say, could we contribute to cancer? Could we contribute to heart? And we didn't want to be in a situation where we had to make that choice. And so we came up with a program they still have today that every employee worldwide gets 1 week off, paid vacation to go serve somebody, anybody. And all we ask back is you write us a letter about what it meant to you and your family, you and your co-workers if you did it together. People did Habitat for Humanity. We had a guy who built orphanage down in Mexico. They went down to Haiti after the earthquake. So rather than direct the good, just inspire the good.
Exactly.
So we're going to have one more topic before we move on to Natalie and questions. And that's investing. Obviously, you're good at it. Carl and I serve on a board called UiPath, and it's a very interesting story. UiPath got their Series A in April 2017. They're valued at $100 million. And that December, they decided to go for Series B. And I contacted Doug Leone, and he got Carl to come out and run Sequoia. And Carl competed for the Series B, and the decision was made by the founder to go with the company that had done the Series A. They helped him when he needed it, and he felt. And interestingly, Carl, you could have walked away right then. You could have said, Jesus, come on. But I watched you fight, and you made him understand what you could do for his business, and he came to like it. He couldn't help it. And when the Series C came, though, only 7 months later, Carl bids $2 billion. $2 billion. It was $100 million 18 months before, and another company bid $3 billion. And the decision Carl had to make was because they couldn't not take the other offer. Look, we're not gonna have a race here, but if you will go to that number, which was way above what Sequoia would normally come in at when they do their biz. How did you make the decision? By the way, it's worth $10.2 billion today, so Carl's a hero. Let's do the end of the story. It's still private, but that had to be a hard decision. And how did you sell your partners on? Why would you make that risk?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first of all, I'm just fortunate to be at Sequoia because the brand of Sequoia carries a lot of weight. And my partners were very, very helpful in thinking through this because admittedly, at the time I was still a novice, and I'm still a novice at investing compared to the amazing partners I have.
Everybody wants to be a novice now. After your success, holy mackerel.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, so it's interesting. It kind of goes back to that kind of wrestling thing. Like when Daniel said, Carl, we're not going to go with you. We're going with someone else. Man, it hit me hard. I hate to lose more than I love to win. And it fired me up. And I figured, you know what? This is a wrestling moment. I got to struggle to get back in here. And we worked so hard then to earn his trust, flying around the world, meeting him for dinners. And the one thing that stuck out to me, Tom, you gave this feedback, right? He said, when I met with Daniel the first time, Daniel said he couldn't connect with me. And I must say it's probably the first, maybe the only, maybe there was a couple that I've ever heard that. I love people. I am a people person. I will do anything for anybody, any time of the day, any day of the year. And that really bothered me. So I worked to earn his trust. I shared with him the value that Sequoia could bring, how we would help him build and scale his business. I brought to him the operational experience that I personally had, along with the community of founders that he will have access to in the Sequoia portfolio. And we just worked relentlessly. And we had this dream that Daniel could build an amazing enterprise B2B business that would stand the test of time. And we wanted to be with him from idea to IPO and beyond. That's how we think. We will help him in every phase of his journey. And eventually he was, gracious enough to accept our offer to lead that series. And in the last 3 years now that we've been together, it's been amazing to see this company rise thanks to you and many other people and Daniel's leadership. And we're very grateful and really thrilled to be investors and supporting this company. But it goes back to, for the younger people out there, when you're told no, that's when all the fun begins.
When the action starts.
When the drive comes out.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I have to say that this is the first board I've had the opportunity to serve on with you. I've been fortunate enough to serve on a number of Sequoia boards with Doug and Jim Getz, but I've never enjoyed a board member more than you, because go-to-market was the big challenge, and that happens to be our background. Companies exploded, but it's just been fantastic. And so I just want to thank you. When I thought of this series, you came immediately to my mind. I called you that day and you said, I am all in. Last night you said, I'm so excited to do this. I love it. So thank you very much. What I'd love to do now is kick it to Natalie, and let's hear what people want to talk about. We'll just chat with them. Thank you very much, Carl.
Tom, thank you. It's been a true honor and blessing. And I feel like I'm over my skis talking to all the people here at Notre Dame for a young man who grew up in Pennsylvania and stumbled and found some success in life. So thank you.
Thank you. Natalie.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks, Carl. Just as you said, Tom, we've got a bunch of great questions, and for everybody on the call, you're welcome to add your questions through the Q&A function. We'll try to get through as many as we can in the time we have together. First question for you, Carl, and for Tom. How do you think that COVID-19 has created and will create opportunities in the tech investing industry?
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying, COVID-19 and the pandemic has accelerated the future in technology by upwards of 3 to 5 years. Overnight, everyone used to talk about this whole notion of a digital transformation. And in 30 days, we had to go through a digital transformation. You had to figure out how to go online, how to communicate internally, how to communicate externally. You had to have the systems and the infrastructure in place to do so. You had to have the security. And what it's also done, it's driven the adoption of the cloud, which was already being adopted at a fast rate. It's accelerated the adoption of the cloud because people aren't in the offices to run their big data center and infrastructure. So COVID-19 has made the digital transformation era real, and it's accelerated it by many years, and it's forced people to have to do things that they were planning on doing in a much shorter time frame. And I would say, Natalie, it's been incredibly impressive to see how companies have been able to quickly adjust to their surroundings and the great challenge that we're all faced with. And it's been really exciting to see the younger generations of companies that we get to work with in the startup community come to the forefront even earlier than they once would have otherwise. And we always say the COVID for some companies has actually created a tailwind, while others, there's a little headwind, but a lot of the technology companies have a tailwind because of this digital transformation and the pandemic itself.
The other thing, Carl, is it's not going back, right? When you think about how it's affected people's thoughts on their real estate, people, in New York City, they're not going to come to work the same way. It's not like we're going to get through this and it's going back. So what we really need to think now is how do we reimagine going forward? And this is where that defines opportunity. People, yes. Carl just said people are going to move faster. People are willing to take chances now because what they had is not going to get them there. That reality. When I talk to people who run accounting firms, legal firms, they're rethinking how they set this thing up completely. And automation is going to be a big part of that. How do you use automation to do certain things? Obviously, Zoom is part of our life. It's kind of like the old Xerox. It's just how we do it now. And it's been more effective than, everybody talks about the Zoom exhaust, right? If you do 10 in a day, but it's allowing us, people are thinking, where can my employees live where they want now? Can they don't have to be right in an office. They could be, and I think that's going to affect how they attract people, how they maintain them. So it's a terrible situation that people are reacting to, as Carl said, extraordinarily well. And I think that will lead to many opportunities for thinking about rethinking business. And if I was a young person, I would be taking advantage of that.
Yeah, Tom, it's interesting. It's a good point. Natalie, living here in the Bay Area, in the Silicon Valley, most companies wanted their people here, and there was a big war for talent. But now they're realizing, right, talent is everywhere. And in fact, there's a lot of now studies out there in a short period of time that says people are happier working from wherever they want with their families. Exactly. In the environment they enjoy, as opposed to being forced to a centralized headquarter location. So I don't think it'll be a student body right movement in one direction or the other, meaning we're all going remote or we're all coming back. There will be a hybrid. But that flexibility, I think, can drive a significant change in how people think about recruiting and retaining their talent going forward.
Yeah.
Great. On a related note, as we think about how to optimize corporate culture, strong culture and mission are things that have featured prominently in this conversation. And Tom, I know they're very important for you and Carl. When each of you serves in a board of director capacity, how do you evaluate these things, and how do you encourage changes if necessary?
Yeah,
Carl, you said before about you can tell the culture of a company if it's healthy or not in a lot of ways. One of them is retention. I mean, employees, we entered the great places to work at NetApp in the year 2000, 2001, whenever the dot-com bubble blew. Bad time to ask everybody, how you feeling? But we entered it not to win an award. We entered it because you get direct feedback from your employees to say whether they're happy, unhappy, and what they would like you to do about it. And we had a lot of meetings on it to say, okay, we got to address it. Many companies don't enter that award because they don't want to do it. So you can win with a bad culture. Let's be clear. There are many companies that have terrible cultures, yet people stay because they get paid enough money and it's a job. But I've always felt what we should aspire to as leaders, what Notre Dame Business School should aspire to, is you want to build leadership styles that people are there because they really want to be there. And they come through because they want to come through, because they believe, as Carl said, they don't want to let the individual they're leading down, but they don't want to let the company down. When you make a commitment, it's incredibly important to you that you come through because you don't want to let your team down. So as a board, and I would say the one that we serve on, we ask questions about it a lot. And it's a very healthy discussion. And when there are issues, you can take action, right? It's usually a leadership issue, by the way. When if a company feels good, but a group doesn't, it's typically a leadership issue. And, I don't believe in starting low and going up. I believe in looking, do I have the right person leading it? If I do, great. If there are issues, let's coach them, but we got to make sure we have the right leaders. What do you think, Carl?
Yeah, well said. One of the first things I was going to say, Tom, is one of the ways to measure it is retention. One of the things people do a lot now is they do employee surveys just to get feedback about how they feel about the company and would they recommend the company to a friend or a peer. A couple other things I'd add is, there is nothing more. I said this earlier, energy and enthusiasm important, but even as important is success. When people are winning and when people are successful, the impact it has on your culture is infectious.
That's right.
At the same time, I think it's important when you think about culture that it's performance-based. Like, it can't just be all kumbaya, my Lord, sitting around the campfire that we love one another, right? Which is important to do at times, but it's also got to be performance-based, because a lot of times when people are frustrated with their culture, it's because they don't see leadership or management taking action on underperformance. And they're hard things to do, but when you get that right, it is so powerful because at work, I'm sitting next to Tom Mendoza, he's a performer, and we have the same objective of winning and being successful, yet keeping the corporate culture. So there's a whole bunch of different ways to think about it and measure it. But I think, looking at it through retention rates, the satisfaction of your employees, being performance driven and leading that way are just a few ways to look at culture. And oh, by the way, you said the board meeting, Tom, if they don't talk about culture and they don't have the person coming in and speaking to you who's running the human side of the business, the chief human resource officer or whoever it may be, or that's a red flag if they're not at the board.
I agree. I think you should be explicit about what your culture is. This is what we believe in. These are the 3 or 4 things that are going to matter here. You should hire to it, and you should promote to it, and you should remove people who don't fit it. Because if you don't, that says that that's your culture. But certain people go, we have a great culture. I'll say, well, describe it. And they don't even know what to say. So it should be, we care about, you tell me what your 3 or 4 things you care about, right? We care about attitude. We care about commitments. We care about the ability to innovate effectively and back each other. Whatever the things are that you think are important, then when you go to promote, when you go to evaluate somebody, you ask, how are they doing against that set of criteria? And when you go to promote, it's very, very critical when you recognize, people emulate the behavior you recognize, whether it's promotion, whether you say it at an all hands. It's very important that they embody what you're trying to get everybody to do. And people say, okay, that's how it goes.
These are fascinating and valuable insights that I know come from a tremendous wealth of experience for you, Tom, and for you, Carl. Just talked about serving in a board of directors role where you get to know these companies, so closely. You have great access to their data. As you think about investing in a company, especially a startup, are there things that stand out to you as indicators of what best looks like, or conversely, things that stand out to you as deal breakers?
I'll let Carl handle that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Tom. Tom, you've been around a lot of these younger companies. So there are, Natalie. I think a lot of it starts and stops with the founder, the entrepreneur, the vision, the mind behind the company. And making sure that founder is self-aware of their strengths and weaknesses and recognizes why sometimes they are the smartest person in the room. They know they got to go out and hire great people around them to fill in their blind spots. So being self-aware is really important when you're spending time with a founder. And whether or not they're authentic and they're humble and grounded, a lot of the things I spoke about earlier. There's a whole bunch of other things that you look at inside the building. You look at the unit economics of the business, you look at the financials, but in early stage investing, you don't have any of that. So you got to look at the strength of the team, whether or not they can develop the product, and all the things inside the building. Then you have to look at outside the building. And one of the things I think about when you think about outside the building and whether or not this company is investable is, are they doing one of 2 things? Are they going out and disrupting a very big market, right, that has a large, TAM, total addressable market opportunity that has not innovated in years, and they're going to go in and disrupt it, right? Because they're singularly focused on a mission. Then the second type of opportunity is ones that are going to create a category or become a category king, where they start something from scratch, they build a category, and an entire economy gets formed around them. So are you disrupting an existing market, or are you creating a new market? I often think about. And then the third thing, it's a very simple thing, is whatever you have that you want to bring to market, to your customers, is it a nice to have, or is it a must have? And think about that. If it's nice to have, it's going to be a lot harder to sell. If it's a must have, people will want it. It drives real business value. It either saves you money or it helps you accelerate revenue. And if you think about that, both inside and outside of the company, I think there are key things to think about when investing.
You just said something during the downturn in early 2000s, I saw the CEO of Jeff Immelt of GE I was on a treadmill, and everybody was trying to work out back then, trying to figure out what was going on. The world was collapsing. And they said to him, why do you meet with any salespeople right now? I mean, nobody's buying anything. He said, there's only 2 reasons to ever meet with a salesperson. They raise the bridge or they lower the water. You just say, make me money or
There you
save me
go.
money. And so I always think about that when I'm looking at young companies. Are we saving somebody a lot of money, or are we making a lot of money? Because other than that, it's not cool. Technology does not make a company.
Yeah, I agree, Tom. I always tell people, let's not confuse the value proposition as selling. It's saving money or drive revenue. You know, solution selling, strategic selling, all of this, like, let's be clear, this is what sells.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Well, let's turn to the question of entrepreneurship. Carl, especially as you seek to encourage other kind of up and coming entrepreneurs, what advice would you have for a less experienced person trying to bring more senior leadership on board, somebody who's got innovation to bring and is trying to get buy-in of more experienced colleagues and leaders?
Yeah, it's a great question because, as I said earlier, one of the things you want to, see in an entrepreneur is a recognition of what they do know and what they don't know. And I think how they can attract people with more experience. I always say to people, hire people that your company is going to grow into. Don't hire people that's going to come along with the journey. Now, you have to do both, but that's kind of a framework to think about it. Now, to attract those people who have probably been there, done that, who have more experience, I think they are going to look at things like culture. They're going to look at things like mission. They're going to look at things like how driven the founder is. They're going to look at things like, quite frankly, it's really important to understand a founder or an entrepreneur and what's got them to the point in the life they are today. What was their upbringing? What challenges or what struggles did they overcome? Do they have perseverance? So if you see that in a young founder, an entrepreneur, and they've had a really, you don't want this, easy glide path that they've come up to through life, but everyone has a story of some sort, and you want to find out about that story. And when you can be attracted to that person because of what they've accomplished and what they've been through, I think it will bring great talent in and people who have more experience. And then if you're mission driven, as I said, and Tom, would I think echo, the older you become and more successful you become, you really want to be around people that are mission driven. If there's a mission associated with the company, I think you'll attract more people.
Totally agree.
Wonderful. We've got time for one more question. And I think, thinking about mission and maybe personal philosophy is a great one to end on. Tom, you're really well known for your personal philosophy that people don't care what you know until they know that you care. Could
That's
you
right.
comment a little bit more on that? And maybe, Carl, you could respond to Tom?
Yeah, if you think about someone that if they called you right now, no questions asked, you get on a plane even though you don't want to fly, if they said, I really need you, Natalie. And there are people, not just because you're related, there are people in your life you would do anything for. Why is that? Because they've given so much to you. They have shown you so clearly they care about you that you want to come back. You want to give back when you love to get that phone call. I gave a talk in India, spent 2 days, spoke in front of 10,000 people in 2 days. It was a wild trip, right back, 24 hours each way. It was crazy. And I got on the plane, I just started to laugh because I said, I just missed 2 billion people, right? So there's got to be a better way, Zoom. But anyway, but what struck, I got back and I got this beautiful letter from the Indian team, our India sales organization. Actually, we have a big facility there, saying they know how hard that trip is. And they just want me to know that if I ever need anything, if I ask for them, they will do whatever they can to come through. And I honestly think that's how, you can make people do something out of fear. You can make them do it because if they don't, they'll get hurt. But I've always thought the best way is if you really, and you can't fake it, you got to care. You want the best for them and their family. You take an interest. And if you ask back and you really know them and they know you care, they'll do whatever they can to come through for you. And that's the essence to me of a great culture. What do you think, Carl?
Tom, I don't know if I can add much. I think it's very well said. And I think you were a picture example of that at NetApp over your years. The only thing I'd add is an individual leader, as you think about your journey through your leadership career, at some point, I would encourage you to move from a world of success to a world of significance. While you're
Love
younger,
that.
you're fighting for success. You're trying to go up the corporate ladder. But when you can shift to focus on your significance and the impact you have on others, it will become much more rewarding than all the success you've accumulated in those early years of trying to grow that corporate ladder or career.
I love that. I love that, Carl.
Significance, and you're rewarded more than you could ever imagine.
The one other thing I would add to, as you reflect back, you'll never regret something you tried that didn't work if you put everything into it. You will regret not going for things.
Yeah.
You look back, you knew you wanted to, call your heart said, but you didn't. So, I mean, you really want, as you're thoughtful about what you want to do in life, if something means so much to you, if somebody asked me once, what's on your bucket list? I said, if it meant enough to me, I'd do it. I don't have a bucket list. Just do it. But anyway, hey, Carl.
Well said, Tom. Well, one final point. I always say, if you believe in something and you do not try to achieve it, actually, you're doing a disservice or disjustice to yourself.
100%.
If you first believe you can achieve, you can, go for it.
100%. So, Carl, thank you so much. Natalie, thank you for the questions. I think Martin's going to close it with a few comments from the Notre Dame Business School Dean. Here you go, Martin.
Yeah, thank you, Carl. Thank you, Tom, for sharing with us your wonderful, wide-ranging, super insightful conversation. Thank you for inspiring us, for challenging us, and also really for witnessing your friendship. Carl, we're so honored by your participation in this event and so very grateful for the opportunity of everyone watching, very much including myself, of course, to learn from you. Tom, thank you for bringing Carl to our students and the college. What a great event. I'd also like to thank everyone who helped facilitate and communicate the event, especially Jean, Natalie, Carol, and Beth, technicians at Andy Studios, and our partners at the Alumni Association of Notre Dame. Finally, thank you everyone for watching. And please join us again on November 6th, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Tom will have his next conversation with Jayshree Ulal, President and CEO of computer networking company Arista Networks. Have a great weekend and go Irish.
Go Irish.
Thank you.